They told us Africa is poor. They showed us starving children, dusty roads, and villages without clean water. But they never told us about Timbuktu, or the gold mines of Great Zimbabwe, or the time when Africa was the richest continent on Earth. They never taught us the real history. Well, let's start here. When you think of Africa, what comes to mind? War? Hunger? Disease? That's no accident. For decades, no, centuries, Africa has been painted as a helpless continent in need of saving. But here's what they didn't show you. Africa is the most resource-rich continent on Earth. Gold, diamonds, oil, cobalt, uranium, rare earth minerals, the list goes on. If Africa is so poor, then why is the whole world fighting to get its resources? It's not poverty, it's exploitation. And that's a very different story. Before colonization, Africa had empires, real empires, powerful, organized, and rich. Take the Mali Empire. In the 14th century, its emperor, Mansa Musa, was so rich that his pilgrimage to Mecca literally crashed the economy of every region he passed through. Historians still say he was the richest person in human history. Then there was Timbuktu, home to one of the world's first universities. People from Europe and the Middle East came to study in Africa. Or Great Zimbabwe, with its towering stone structures, built without mortar, still standing after centuries. These weren't tribes lost in time. They were civilizations. But then came colonialism. Between the late 1800s and early 1900s, European powers gathered at the Berlin Conference. Guess what was on the agenda? How to divide up Africa. Not if, but how. No African leaders were invited. Maps were drawn. Borders were carved. Empires were destroyed. The goal? Extract resources, exploit labor, control land. And to do that, they had to rewrite Africa's story. They erased African brilliance from textbooks. They taught that Africa had no history, no innovation, no culture until Europe arrived. A bold-faced lie. What they didn't tell you is that Africans were already trading with India, China, and the Middle East before Europe even learned to sail properly. They didn't tell you about the Benin bronzes, or the libraries of Timbuktu, or the mathematical systems used by ancient Africans that predate the pyramids. They kept all of that hidden. Why? Because the people with no history are easier to control. Even after independence, the game didn't end. It just changed. Today, multinational companies still extract billions in resources from Africa, while many Africans live without electricity or clean water. Corruption? Sure, it exists. But where did that corruption come from? In many cases, it was installed and funded by foreign powers who didn't want strong African governments, because strong governments ask for a fair share. And let's not forget, Africa loses more money each year through illicit financial flows and tax evasion than it receives in aid. So who's helping who? But here's the good news. Africa is waking up. Young people across the continent and in the diaspora are reconnecting with their roots. They're telling their own stories, building businesses, launching startups, leading movements. There's a new generation rising, one that doesn't ask for permission, one that knows the truth. Africa was never poor. It was robbed. So the next time someone talks about Africa like it's a charity case, remind them, Africa fed the world once. It built empires. It shaped civilization. And it's rising again. Bellhop Bell, if you learned something new today, hit that like button. Pushpin share this with someone who still thinks Africa is developing. Oncoming Fist. And if you're ready to keep rewriting history with us, don't forget to subscribe. Studio microphone, because this is just the beginning.